mission of FSU Coach is to prepare and equip the next generation of coaches and sports professionals with best practices and current research to enable them to pursue excellence. We have 2 academic programs, the online graduate certificate, which is 4 classes, and also a 10-class master's in athletic coaching. Our graduate certificate and master's program can be started at any time, either the summer, fall, or spring.
The types of classes that we offer focus on the athlete as a whole person. We focus on the theory and practice, the research, the helping skills. I came to FSU Coach because I truly believed in the mission and the purpose of the program.
I think I have my dream job being a head coach at Florida State, but I know there's always more ways that I can help my athletes and better prepare as a coach. If you're interested in going into coaching or joining the FSU Coach program, I would just say don't even think about it and do it.
Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to another edition of FSU Coach Live. My name is Tim Backhurst, and Omar Badran is the guest today. Omar, you've been on my show. We were just talking about it 4 years ago, maybe. It's been a while. A lot has happened in your career. Share us a little bit about what you've been up to, where you've been. What are you doing now?
Wow, 4 years is a long time. First of all, thank you so much for having me on again, Tim. It's always a pleasure and a privilege to speak to you, both on air and off air. What happened since? So since we last spoke,
let's start back at the beginning, because a lot of people who may have never seen the show won't know your history. So start back there, and then we'll get to the current.
Yeah. So I was born and raised in Lebanon. I was born into a soccer family. You know, my grandfather played for the national team. My uncles played pro. One of my uncles is on the Hall of Fame of Clemson as a top goal scorer. So at the age of 17, I left Lebanon to pursue a degree in coaching and sports development in Manchester Metropolitan in the UK. And then after the UK, I had a few brief stints in the professional game, playing in Norway, Italy, and 4 years in Saudi Arabia. And then in 2018, I came to the United States to pursue a master's in sports management, as well as an executive coaching degree at Queen's University. And then since 2018 up until now, I've just been coaching youth. And then I coached 3 years at UNC Charlotte as an assistant coach. And then at Loudoun United in the USL Championship as an assistant coach. And then Chattanooga FC within the MLS Next Pro environment as an assistant coach. And then as I'm starting my new role as the U15 head coach at Real Salt Lake. And I've had to pursue all my coaching licenses throughout this time, from the D, C, B, all the way to the senior A license.
One might say that the coaching life is one of nomadic experience. You've been all over the place.
Yes. There are downsides to that, but there's also immense upsides. Is that you meet people from all walks of life, and I'm really grateful to have a wide network of mentors that I can rely on, and I count you as one of them, Tim. And it's just really gratifying when you're coaching on the field, even if you have to move every so often.
Talk a little bit about what that's like. I imagine it can be frustrating in the sense that you're invested in this club, you're invested in this team, you're there maybe a year, maybe 2, maybe 3, maybe less than, and then all of a sudden, nope, time to leave, time to move from friends and transition to somewhere new.
Yeah, and I guess, I'm a firm believer that players intrinsically want to be challenged, and they want to learn, and they want to improve, and they want to win. So dealing with the players is actually the easy part. The harsh lesson that I've had to learn is that you need to create a cohesive leadership team amongst the staff before you worry about what type of culture you want to implement with the players. Most of us, we skip that part. We skip the ground rules for the staff and how we're going to communicate, how we're going to hold each other accountable, how we're going to work together. And we jump straight into what we want to do with the players. And that's how you have miscommunication and breakdown in relationships sometimes amongst staff members, which players can sniff out very easily. And then already you're on the back foot.
Yeah. I've worked with some teams, some coaching staff, I should say, where not oftentimes, but sometimes the staff is not necessarily selected by the head coach. Sometimes it's a general manager, sometimes it's an owner. And then as a consequence, you have this, dare I say, hodgepodge of different groups of coaches coming in with different philosophies, different expectations, different work ethic standards, etc. Do you see that in professional soccer as well?
Yes. Yes. And, the most dangerous thing you can do is make assumptions about people. Yes, I can understand why some coaches get frustrated when it's not their man being selected, man or woman that's being selected. But at the same time, I believe that how you communicate with each other is more important than who is on your team. And I believe with enough work, with enough deliberate, intentional work, with some compassion, you can work with a lot of people, even if you didn't handpick them, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
We talk about handpicking a staff and you choosing your own staff. Really, you're basically saying that you don't want to go out of your comfort zone. You want to go with what you know. You've known this person for 8 years, 10 years, so you want them as an assistant. But if you really want to develop your leadership skills, you're going to have to develop people within your staff that are from all walks of life. So, yeah.
Yeah, I'm just taking some notes. That's a great insight. From your perspective, you're now head coach of the under 15s, but you've been in a variety of roles in soccer. Talk a little bit about the different roles you've had and what you've learned from those.
Yeah, being a head coach is night and day different from being an assistant. When you're a head coach, you're constantly under a microscope from the staff and the players, because players watch what you do as a head coach and they ask themselves two questions: what can I get away with, and what can't I get away with? And so you as a head coach are setting a standard, not just with what you say in a PowerPoint presentation, but also in how you behave on a day-to-day basis. And then players pick up on that. And they also pick up on what you praise. So if you're praising skill or if you're praising effort, players notice that and they start to replicate that. Whereas an assistant, you can engage in something called ghost coaching, where you have very informal individual conversations with players for 2 to 3 minutes. And there's not as much pressure because you're not under a microscope like the head coaches.
Talk a little bit about the praise thing. You said skill or effort. What do you recommend coaches should do?
There's different schools of thought on this, and I'm not necessarily saying that I'm right and other people are wrong. Me personally, based on my philosophy, I would always prioritize praising effort over skill, because at the end of the day, very few kids will actually make it into the pro game. I think it's less than 1%. I think it's like 0.8% of the academy players in the country sign pro contracts. So what we're really trying to teach them is life lessons. And that's hard work, it's selflessness, it's sacrificing yourself for the greater good. Those are really the values that we're trying to teach on a day-to-day basis. Skill is sometimes it's God-given. It's talent. It's something that the coach didn't teach. It's something that the player innately has. But the effort is something that the player 100% controls. And that's what we want to praise, because that's what's in the player's control, really.
Interesting you talk about talent and skill. My teenage son and I have been discussing this over the last few weeks in terms of what is the difference between talent and skill. And my argument was, well, skill can be developed. Talent is something that may be innate. But then his response is, well, if that's true, how can you tell if somebody's talented? Because maybe they've never had skills developed to show it. When you look at your under 15 team, how do you identify players that maybe have the quote unquote it factor that would allow them to propel themselves into higher or more success in the sport?
Yeah, I think, talent is skill plus execution. So when I look at a player and they do an incredible piece of skill, I ask myself one question, and this is true, and not necessarily for my environment, but if I'm ever scouting a player, whenever I was in college or in the pro game, and I was always out there recruiting on those long trips, and I ask myself, is that skill coachable? Yes or no? If it's no, then it's an innate talent. It's something that the player already has, and it's not something that a coach gave him. So I always ask myself, I'm looking for qualities that can't be coached, like how to do a roulette in the corner flag against two players and nutmeg one of the players to escape pressure. That's just one example. So yeah, like I always ask myself, can that skill be coached? If not, then that person is innately talented.
You coach under 15 now. You talked about having coaching adults. What are the similarities and differences you're experiencing now coaching youth versus coaching professionals?
Wow. There's lots of similarities, and the similarities are players are competitive no matter how old they are. When they step on the field, they always want to compete. They always want to try to win. Those are the most glaring similarities. The differences is the context. So, with academy players, it's all about development, and we have to prioritize development over the results. Whereas in the pro game, it is mainly about results. It's mainly about, okay, can you win the next game? And you become more pragmatic. Whereas at the development level, at the academy level, you're more just trying to build good habits. It's a long game. It's not a short game. You're trying to develop players both on the ball and off the ball. You're checking for understanding. It's more of a holistic approach. Whereas the pro game, it's, hey, we need to get immediate results. We need to put the starting 11 that has the best chance of winning.
But you're also a coach who's probably competitive, just like the rest of us. You're training, as you said, youth who still want to win. How do you balance that development with the fact that you want to win? And if you're not winning, even if you're developing players, the ownership may be looking at your record as opposed to whether Johnny has become a good human being. So how do you balance that?
Yeah, that's the $1 million question. I think you have to, it's how you frame it. And the way that you frame it is that you want to try and emphasize both rather than choosing one or the other. So rather than just choosing to win or just choosing development, you really want to try and emphasize both at the same time. So we're here to develop. We're here to make sure that the players' behaviors are consistent with the game model and what the club is trying to look for. But ultimately, we also want to be competitive. And being competitive, believe it or not, is a skill. I've heard a lot of people say that it requires no talent to be competitive, but I disagree. I think it does take talent to be competitive. And that's something that you try to teach every single training session so that they showcase it in the game. So I would try not to have it as binary as development versus winning. I think if you can mold the two together somehow, then that's really how you get the best out of the environment that you're in.
One of the challenges I think any youth coach experiences is working with parents. What, dare I say, situations have you experienced that have challenged you, and what ideas or suggestions do you have to help mitigate I'm going to say this in quotes, the parent problem, which so often comes up in youth sports?
Yeah, so full transparency, I've never really had an issue dealing with parents. I've always adopted the approach of being transparent and very direct, but also compassionate. So I don't want to be direct and not compassionate. It's kind of like, I think the word for it in English is candor, right? Where you have a high level of empathy, but also a high level of transparency as well. And so if you mold the two together, you get candor. And so I think parents want the truth. They also want to see their kids succeed because it's their child. So if you can communicate with candor, which means a high level of empathy, but also a high level of transparency and honesty, then I think you're going to save yourself a lot of trouble when dealing with parents.
It is always a challenge with parents, not because parents can be difficult, but parents are looking out for their child first and foremost, and may not necessarily understand your goals as a coach of a team, and therefore place emphasis on their child rather than understanding where you're coming from. Does Real Salt Lake or you, do you have any documentation that parents have to sign beyond maybe just the contract to play for Rail that enables you to refer back to documentation should something arise?
Yes, the club has very clear boundaries, which cannot be crossed. One example of that is no communicating with the coaches up to 48 hours after the game. I think also during the week, you can't communicate with coaches. It's all done through the administration.
Okay.
So it puts a bit of distance between parents and coaches, which I think is healthy, because I think any professional environment requires boundaries. But then you do, once a semester, you do sit down with the parents and the players and just be as open as possible. Just say, here, this is your platform now. I'm here to listen to your concerns, questions, queries, anything that's on your mind that you would like to discuss. And then I can plug in some feedback as we go along in the conversation. So like I said, I've never really had an issue with dealing with parents, just as long as you communicate with candor and as long as you're very honest. And you need to protect yourself as a coach. You need to give the kids a chance. So you need to challenge your own assumptions about certain players rather than just saying, oh, this kid's not good enough. Well, let's see. Maybe you're right, but also maybe you're wrong. Maybe the player is better than what you thought. And then if they're not, then that's something that you can bring up in the meeting. So it's more the how rather than the what when it comes to communicating with parents.
Somebody may be interested who's watching this now or in the future listening to our podcast. Under 15 head coach, professional team. That sounds fun. Talk a little bit about your day-to-day responsibilities and roles, what your time looks like each day, and just give a perspective of what it looks like to be a coach in your position.
Yeah, so we'll set out a theme for each week, and that theme can be togetherness, it can be resilience, it can be competition. So we have a theme set out for the whole week in preparation for a game. And then we'll split out the week in terms of how much of the week is focused on attacking, how much is focused on defending, which days do we go large, which days do we go medium size, small size. And then we start talking about what the roster will look like. So it's very detailed, and it takes everything into account, the physical characteristics of the player, the technical, the tactical, the emotional. There's lots of informal conversations that happen with players throughout the week to find out where they are, where their best position is, what questions they have about their roles in all 4 moments of the game. So it's quite detailed, and every day is focused on the training session. So if the training session is at 4:30, we're in early in the morning that day to discuss what the session would look like for that afternoon.
When you say we, I'm assuming you have a staff.
Yes, so the performance coach, the medical staff. So I have a meeting twice a week with the performance coach and the medical staff, once at the start of the week, once at the end of the week, to discuss any injury concerns, where the team is physically, and it's important for me to lean on their experience and expertise, and then also with the assistant coaches to get their insights as well.
And how many assistant coaches?
2, but they alternate.
What do you mean?
So 2 of them. So one of them does 2 days a week, and the other one does the other 2 days.
Okay. So we practice 4 days a week. Typically a game on the weekend.
So we have 5 training sessions a week, but on Mondays we don't have an assistant because it's just a regen. It's just a recovery session.
Okay. So what would your typical day look like? I mean, take today, for example. What would it be from when you get up to when you go to bed?
So it would be, well, the first would be meeting with the assistant coaches to discuss the session. And then after that, it would be meeting with the DOC. And with the DOC, we do something every day, every week. It's called looking back and looking forward. So
What's
how do we
DOC?
reflect? Sorry?
What's DOC?
A director of coaching.
Okay.
Yeah,
Sorry.
which is basically the academy director. And then we do a process which is called looking back and looking forward, reflections on the game. And then with looking forward, it's, okay, what are the needs of the team this week based on what we saw in the last game? And that meeting can take up to 10 minutes. It could take an hour. So it really varies from day to day, week to week, based on the needs of the team. And then, and then we spend the afternoon. I spend the afternoons as well assisting the older age groups because I can learn so much from the U16 and the U18 head coaches. So I try as much as possible to actually be on the field and observe them, record their sessions, ask them questions, attend their team meetings. And there's a lot to soak in from those, which I've already used in my presentations and my PowerPoints and my training sessions with the U15s to make sure that I'm as aligned as possible with the older age groups. Mm-hmm. And then there's my training session at 4:30 at the end of the day.
And how long does that last for?
About an hour and a half.
Okay. What are some of the challenges you've experienced working in a youth setting?
Fitting in, that's really what stands out. When you're going into a new environment, especially a professional environment where the standards are very high, you instantly want to be liked, you want to be accepted, and that means a lot of effort on your behalf, on my behalf, to take people out to coffee, sit down with them, attend their meetings, go the extra mile, try to do as much work as possible for them to improve the relationship. So really the initial portion, the first 6 months, and I would advise this to anyone starting a new role, is really go the extra mile in the first 6 months of your job and go out of your way to try and help people, get to know people, and build relationships, because that's what sets the culture, is the strength of the relationships. I would say, a culture is a continuum. You have standards and relationships. You can't have strong relationships with low standards, and you can't have high standards with weak relationships. Mm-hmm. So it needs to be strong relationships plus high standards.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, good point. Now, you and I have talked over the years, and I've followed your career for quite some time, and I know some things you can't talk about on air for obvious reasons, because maybe they could be identified or people could be identified. But a lot of people think that the coaching at the elite level is just this, I don't know, this sense of the ideal. When I get there, everything's going to be great. When I get there, everything will work out fine. And over your career, you've experienced some bumps in the road, some experiences of poor coaching, of poor management, of players maybe acting in a manner that they shouldn't. And I wonder if you could maybe just share some of the realities of professional coaching, and it isn't always what people perceive it as.
Yeah, I'll quote, excuse me, I'll quote Julian Nagelsmann, who was the Bayern Munich head coach, coaching the German national team. And he said, the higher up the levels you go, the more elite you become, the more the job becomes about social competence. I think he said 70% of his job is social competence, and 30% is technical and tactical. And I honestly couldn't, after my experiences, I could not agree more. And I would say maybe it's even higher than 70% in some cases. again, it's what we talked about strong relationships and high standards, but the relationship piece is the crucial part. You know, you can be the most intelligent coach, you can have the best tactical knowledge, you can have the best video analysis skills, the best opposition scouting presentations, but if you can't relate with people, you're just not going to go far. People are not going to have your back. And again, working as the most important attribute that I try to transmit to players is the most important quality is to be a team player. That's the most important quality. It's not scoring a goal or scoring an assist. It's being a team player. And after my experiences, I'm learning that it's the same for coaches. You know, you have to be adaptable. You have to be a good team player. You have to listen to feedback. You have to be emotionally intelligent. You have to be careful about which battles you pick and which battles you try and avoid. It's a very careful balancing act, because as coaches, if you think of this circle as your sphere of influence, what you're trying to do is you're trying to operate outside that sphere of influence. So you're trying to be here. You're trying to get as much influence as possible beyond your official title and position. So yeah.
We got a question from somebody watching live, and they said, how many players does the academy produce for the first team on average from each generation?
How many players does the academy produce for the first team on average from each generation? So I know that last year, if I'm not mistaken, thing is, it's kind of tricky to answer that, because do you mean for the second team or for the first team? Because both teams are professional. So if we're including the second team in that conversation, I would say about 7 or 8 players get from the academy and get promoted onto the MLS Next Pro team. But if you're talking about from the MLS Next Pro onto the first team, that number drops down to maybe two players.
And from you may not be able to answer this, but from a financial standpoint, I'm assuming that is valuable in the sense that a player doesn't have to be purchased from another club for X millions of dollars. And while the academy may be expensive, it's more efficient to do that than go out and purchase some player for $10 million.
You know, when David Beckham bought Inter Miami, he did an interview recently talking about his conversations with Sir Alex Ferguson, and David Beckham was seeking some advice about how to be successful with Inter Miami, having just bought the club. And Sir Alex Ferguson told him the absolute first thing that you have to do is create a strong academy, and that's coming from Sir Alex Ferguson. Because then not only is it cheaper and more efficient to develop players from the academy to the first team, but you're developing a club identity. And that's what all clubs are ultimately trying to do. It's an immense source of pride. It's an example used for all academy players. You develop an identity and you develop a reputation for developing players, and then your stock goes up. Plus the added benefit, which you mentioned, being cheaper and more efficient of developing your own players.
Talk to me a little bit about the idea of sports specialization, because we know in general that sports specialization is a bad thing in youth, and that athletes need to participate in a variety of sports for long-term athlete development, for less likely to burn out, less likely to get injured, etc. But I would say soccer in particular is very, we could name other sports, but soccer in particular is very keen to start players competing in their club system young, and maybe not specialize, or excuse me, maybe specialize in that sport rather than participate in a variety of sports. How do you address that in, for example, 15-year-olds and below, who one would argue shouldn't be just playing soccer?
Yeah, well, I lived in Norway, and I can tell you in Norway, and please forgive me if I'm wrong, somebody might have to correct me on this, but in Norway, all kids are required to play 3 sports per season. And then we wonder why Norway dominates the Winter Olympics every tournament. And it's not a surprise at all, because when I was there, players were playing handball, basketball, soccer, cross-country skiing. It's just it was perplexing to me, because I had come from the generation of 10,000 hours doing the same skill over and over. I mean, I personally would prefer that they play different sports, and that's something I tell parents is during Christmas breaks or Thanksgiving breaks or anything like that, just have them play different sports. Because the one question I get asked is, what skills should they be working on during the off days or the holidays and stuff like that? And I always say, just play basketball. It's great hand-eye coordination. Just play other sports, not just for the skills that you could pick up from those other sports, but also to give them a mental break. I think that's something we don't take into account as much, because psychology is not something you can see on a play. It's not something you can track with data, but it is immensely important that players get a psychological break as well as a physical one.
Yeah, great point. Data analytics and AI is becoming a more and more important topic, and a lot of the professional teams, and I know soccer has always been at the forefront of this, have been using data to make decision making in practice, in games, etc. How much do you use data analytics? How much do you use AI to help you as a coach?
Me personally, throughout my career, data has been incredibly important in terms of deciphering the performance. Because in football, or soccer, as you call it, there's sometimes a huge distance between the performance and the result. So you really want to get a gauge of how good the performance was, rather than just looking at the outcome. So, I've been studying data for 6 years now. I talked to Dr. Joe Thomas, who's the lead analyst for Real Salt Lake, and he is just a wealth of knowledge. Like, every time I talk to him, I learn something new. He's an oracle of wisdom when it comes to data. And you have to be careful what you look at in terms of data, because there's a lot of noise and not enough signal. And what you want to do is you want to find the signal. You want to find out which metrics are actually most relevant and have the strongest correlation with winning.
So what metrics do you consider important?
So expected goals is the first one to look at for me. Some coaches don't like it. I personally look at it every game. I've created my own algorithm on expected goals, so I can calculate shot probability every game for every shot. So expected goals is one. Box entries is another. Box entries is how many times do you enter the opposition penalty box. And the reason that that's important is because I look at the elite teams like Man City, Bayern Munich, Paris Saint-Germain, and these teams have up to between 25 and 30 box entries per game. So again, that's a strong correlation with chance creation. So box entries is another. Deep progressions is another. So, how many times does the ball enter the opposition's deep defensive third? And some coaches like to look at duels. How many duels are won and lost? It really depends on your playing style, because some metrics won't be beneficial to you because you play a certain way, whereas other metrics will be more relevant because you play a fundamentally different style of play. So the metrics that I just mentioned to you about box entries, expected goals, all that stuff is relevant to the way that our team plays. But it may not be relevant to a team that's maybe more direct, if that makes sense.
Yeah. One of the things that I've seen so often is collecting data in heart rate and exertion, and when we should sub somebody based on how hard they're working. Do you make any live decisions on those things, or is this a general idea of when fatigue is happening in a player? How do you use all of the heart rate data and some of those hard metrics?
Yeah, and that's where your relationship with the performance coach becomes crucial, because you will be given live information during the game from the performance coach, especially at the youth level. The most important thing at the youth level is player safety, physical and emotional. So obviously some things that you can see, like when a player is really struggling, their movement is not great and they're just lagging behind everyone else. So that stuff is sort of obvious to the naked eye, but it's always useful to get an idea from the performance coach when a player is being red zoned, as we call it. Being in the red zone is you're at serious risk of an injury, and so preventative measures need to be taken, and that player needs to be taken off.
Okay. I got another question in the chat coming up, but I wanted almost a quotable quote from you, in the sense that AI has arrived. It's developing quickly. How do you balance AI use, and how do you address the argument that perhaps AI should or should replace coaches, because it's able to analyze data differently, arguably more effectively than a human, and therefore you should just allow AI to make your decisions, whether it be team selection, substitutions, strategy, etc.?
Yeah, this is a super fascinating topic that I'm just not well versed in yet. I mean, I'm well versed in data, but not as much in AI. I would definitely be interested in learning more about how AI can replace some decision making, because I do think as coaches, and I include myself in this, that we do have certain blind spots. We just can't see everything. We can't know everything. Now, I don't know about AI replacing coaches, but I'm sure that AI can definitely supplement and assist coaches when it comes to decision making, such as substitutions and all the other stuff. Yeah.
Well, you timed this well, Omar, because this weekend, by the way, I'm speaking on AI use in coaching. So if you're interested, for those of you watching online, you can register for this and get online access. You don't have to be there in person. But we've got a great list of speakers coming up this weekend at Nova Southeastern. So there's the information. You can always go to our website, FSU Coach, fsu-coach.fsu.edu. And you can find the clinic there and details on that. So I had a little plug, right? You brought it up, so I had to plug it. Okay, next question. Again, same person. Thanks for the answer. I want to ask how you establish a balance between professionalism and spirit in sports, taking the example of the U15 players who are quite bound by high demands. I'm guessing this question is about under 15. You're really under pressure. You're under a lot of pressure to get to that next stage, to get to that next opportunity. And how do you balance the idea of having fun, of enjoying the experience, when all the players are thinking about is, am I going to make it?
Yeah, that's honestly, thank you for the question. That's a really, really tough question to answer. My initial answer, and again, if you ask me this question in 6 months, I might change my mind, but it really comes down to who you are as a coach, who you are on the inside. Because on the one hand, you need to prepare them for the older age groups. You need to hit certain metrics. You need to target a few learning objectives. You need to do certain technical and tactical things. But at the same time, you got to remember that these are just kids. And they need engagement, they need fun. And, to answer your question, I would maybe first look at where the country is as a whole. And unfortunately, there is a loneliness epidemic among young men, especially young boys. 40 years ago, young men were asked, how many friends can you rely on in case of an emergency? And the most common answer was 5. That same survey was done now in 2024, last year, and the most common answer was 0. So you really have to first know yourself as a coach. You have to treat people with compassion, build a culture that prioritizes teamwork and selflessness. But at the same time, you have to give them a lot of love individually, because the society that we're in now is volatile, it's uncertain, it's complex, and it's ambiguous. It's all of those four. So it's VUCA. And the forecast for the next 10 years is that it's going to become even more volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. So yes, you have to push and have high demands and push them to be the best versions of themselves. But at the same time, they need an arm around the shoulder. You know, I was asked by a coach, should I go high demand or should I go high support? And I'm like, you got to do both. You have to be hyper demanding of them because this is a professional setting and you're preparing them for the older age groups. But you also have to come in with so much support because these kids put so much pressure on themselves on top of the pressure that their parents put on them. So that would be my answer.
Well, I want to be respectful of your time. Last thoughts in terms of what advice do you have for other coaches that you've learned as a coach over the years?
I'd say if you are a youth coach, a youth academy coach, really, and I say this because it's working so well for me, go out of your way to help the older age groups. If it's to be a ball boy, if it's to do extra video work, it's to have IDPs done. It's anything and anything that you're good at, anything that you enjoy doing, offer your services free of charge to the older age groups. One, that'll improve your relationship within the club and your standing. You become less replaceable. And then two, you get to learn from people that are more experienced than you. You know, I say the best way to learn from someone is to work for them. So just go out of your way to go the extra mile. It's beneficial to you as a person because then you become a giver. You're giving something to your community, and that's something that we're all striving to do. And second of all, it'll improve your standing. And when the next promotion comes up, your name is going to come up because you're going the extra mile. You're not doing it for the money. You're doing it to help the older age groups in whatever capacity they need.
Great advice. If somebody wants to reach out to you personally and maybe has a question or comment or just wants to connect, what's the best way for them to do that?
You can email me at obadran@rsl.com. I'm very responsive via email, so don't be afraid to reach out if you have any questions or queries or concerns. I try to help as many people as possible throughout my life, and that includes people outside of my scope.
And just again, once again, obadran@rsl.com. Omar, thanks so much for joining me. I really appreciate your insight, expertise, and just giving us some of your time. Just a reminder, everybody, we try to do these fairly regularly, so be sure to subscribe wherever you're watching from. But we try to keep everything on YouTube with a list of everything that we've covered over the last, hard to believe, 5 years, and also on our podcast, which you can find on Spotify. But on behalf of myself, Tim Baghurst, Omar, Badran, thank you so much for watching.
Tim, thank you.